I'm a believer that this team's going to win the national championship.
Something stupid is coming out of his mouth.
I don't know. Maybe it's just my age. He needs his vote pulled immediately. And of course, yes, a season like this has to have a name.
Let's talk about something good about Justin Freck.
What are you doing? Season of dreams. Ohio State, my guys, are either the best or the second best program in the history of college football.
This guy is a bonehead. They love him.
I question your judgment as an adult. I really do.
I was a total hater. I know that for a fact, and I just don't get it.
Get us back our sleeves.
And say, bring me that. That's the one I want. Welcome to Juckonbucks on a Wednesday. Appreciate y'all so much for joining me. And we have got quite a bit to get to today. We've got some news that came out from the Woody yesterday during those press conferences that I think is pretty interesting. One thing that my buddy Chad called last week has been made official, and that is Edric Houston, superstar freshman Edric Houston, who is an edge, played inside last week, and he is making that move. They are officially moving Edric Houston to the inside. We'll talk about what that means. It's a big deal. It's a really big deal, particularly when it comes to recruiting. Of course, we've got the college football playoff to talk about. The selection committee made the first rankings last night. Those are scrolling at the bottom of the screen, and that is in place of where I usually have subscribed to the show, like the show, all that nonsense. It's not there this morning. That doesn't mean you get out of it. You still got to do all that stuff today. I'm just going to tell you today, it's not going to be scrolling on the bottom. Anyway, last night, Tuesday night, was the first time in probably maybe 2015 that I actually watched that ESPN production of that show. Do you guys remember the first college football ranking where you were? So the first one, remember, that was Ohio State having lost the opener to Virginia Tech and then just destroyed Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship. Were they going to make it in? And I was at Cleveland Browns Stadium on a Sunday, maybe 10 or 15 minutes before the game started, and you could see the pockets of buzz when people were getting the news going all around the stadium. And then the cheers here and there. And it just kind of traveled through the stadium by word of mouth with little pockets around. Like we were all just settling into our seats. One of the coolest sports memories I'll ever have is seeing that at an NFL game and just everybody realizing. And then they eventually announced it on the Jumbotron. Really cool moment. But maybe the next year, 2015, was the last time that I watched that actual show that they do on ESPN where they give the rankings, because it's so obnoxious. They stall, they do commercials to try to build artificial suspense. They didn't do that last night. And I don't watch ESPN shows as it is. I watch games, but they did it properly last night. They just spit the rankings out, and I was very happy that they did that. Before those rankings came out yesterday, I wanted to, I aired my show that I did it myself, and I just ran through the entire process myself to put myself in some of those similar situations that I knew the committee would be faced with, because I got a rule, and that is, if I'm going to come on here and criticize someone, I at least try to put myself in their shoes and think, okay, here's what I know, here's what I don't know that they do, how would I react, and then kind of go accordingly. That's my rule. It is clear that some of you do not subscribe to my rule, as you came out and blasted me, a couple of you, in a way that I thought was a little unfair, like the guy who told me I ranked BYU way too high, and I do not understand the new world of college football, as BYU, playing in the G5 with their G5 schedule, could not possibly be ranked up by Ohio State and Georgia. But someone forgot to tell him, in the new world of college football, BYU is now in the Big 12, a power conference. Anyway, where this committee ranks BYU, not too close to where I had them. Am I surprised by that? Absolutely not. I said it yesterday. Defeated, they beat top 15 SMU, and they destroyed a ranked Kansas State. 2 ranked wins. They beat K-State 38-9. 8-0 with 2 ranked wins, far better than Texas, who is 7-1 with 1 ranked win. Now, remember that when they roll that crap out tomorrow, and Texas is ahead of BYU. They shouldn't be. BYU's resume is better than Miami's. Miami just 1 ranked win. Remember that when they put Miami ahead of BYU. I certainly suspect both of them will be ahead of BYU. Should not be that way, but it will be. And it was. I'll give you an even funnier story. BYU, in their 2 ranked wins, are more ranked wins than the 4 teams ahead of them combined. I guess the old ranked wins thing doesn't matter anymore. Like that used to be the biggest thing with these committees, but they change it. They move the goalpost depending on who it is. And, it is what it is. And you could say it's the first ranking. It doesn't matter. Just win and it'll all play out. Everybody said the same thing about Florida State the whole time last year throughout the process. So also saying like, just win and you'll get in. It's like there are scenarios where you should be able to still get in with just one loss, and we can kind of see by how they're treating you when you're undefeated if you'll be one of those teams that'll still be able to get in with one loss. I don't really like a couple of things about this. I don't. But all in all, I thought that it gave us a window into what we can expect moving forward, how they feel about certain teams, how they feel about certain conferences, and kind of the age-old question, which is, what do you value more? How you feel about how good the team is versus what they have accomplished, the merit that they've established during the season, and there is got to be some balance there. And some people will balance. It's more what I think they are versus what they've accomplished. There has to be a balance there, because if there's not, I don't feel like I'm explaining this the way I want to. So let's say there are people who feel like it should just be the best teams. Well, how do you say who's the best teams? And some people go to power ratings. It should just be based on power ratings. Well, power ratings are a predictive measure generated by computers. So what Vegas uses to set lines. And that's cool. Okay. Usually they're pretty spot on. But there's a problem with just going by power ratings. And that is, if you look at a power rating, even a very popular power rating, like let's look, for instance, at ESPN's FPI. This is banned from my show because of its idiocy, but I'm going to pull it up to make the point here, just because it is a very popular power rating. And I'll pull up ESPN's FPI, and I want you to look around number 15 or 16. Where is that sucker? Number 17. At number 17 in ESPN's FPI, a very popular power rating, you've got USC. USC is 2-5 in the Big Ten. So by merit, a horrible season, but by FPI, a power rating, they're better than BYU. They're better than South Carolina. So if we were just going on FPI, we've got USC rated ahead of them. But what have you done to deserve it? There has to be merit. You have to be able to say that I've put together a body of work that I deserve to get into the playoffs as well. Without that, then you can run into situations. I'll just give you a hypothetical. Penn State solidly at number 6, right? A very long shot to make the conference championship. So the rest of the season, what if Penn State just wants to, in the second half, pull their starting lineup? Just shut it down. Their power rating isn't really going to change. They're still going to be the 6th best team. But now, at the end, they're going to have 2 or 3 losses. It's not going to matter. Well, they'll have 3 losses, let's say. It shouldn't matter based on power rating. They're the 6th best team. They didn't get any worse. They probably got better and healthier, right? So you have to keep the meritocracy part of the equation. It can't just be power ratings, or else we're going to run into situations like that all the time. Part of the reason that I did not want to go to this expanded playoff is not part of the reason, really the only reason, that I felt like it would devalue the regular season. And happily, I am admitting that I was wrong. It did not devalue the regular season. About week 7, I said for sure, all right, I was wrong. Everybody is just as jazzed up for all these games. I thought that there would be people saying it doesn't matter, and that attitude would kind of permeate. And then that would just, thinking about that potentially happening hurt my heart. And I didn't want to do it. I also didn't want to lose out on that big upset being so incredibly consequential. But honestly, I haven't lost anything from the regular season. But I feel like if you do this, just going by power ratings and not including oh, but you also earned your spot, because that has to be part of the equation to me, then you will devalue the regular season by a huge margin. If a team like a USC, let's just say, for instance, they had 4 losses, maybe they wouldn't be 16th, maybe they would be 12th. Maybe they would be 12th. And if you got them at 12th with 4 losses and you're just going by power ratings, that team's in. They don't deserve that spot. They don't deserve it at all, but they're technically one of the 12 best according to power ratings. And that's why you have to keep some meritocracy. So, to be honest, my list, when I did it, looks pretty similar to theirs. Even in, when you kind of group them in tiers and you go by, okay, I'm looking at these 3 teams. How do I put them? Like, I'm really similar to them. My list was Oregon, Georgia, Ohio State, BYU, Indiana. Then at 6, I had Miami, 7, Texas, 8, Tennessee, 9, Penn State, 10, Notre Dame, 11, Alabama. And when you look at theirs, like almost identical in the way I ranked those teams against each other as we climbed up the ladder. And I think that yours would probably look pretty similar if you did the same thing. The difference that we had was what I figured would be the difference, the BYU and the Indiana debate. BYU is in a Power 4 conference. BYU has 2 ranked wins. BYU has had a couple of close calls. Indiana, and I'll use them to make this argument here. Indiana, we all have preconceived notions, and it shows up in our betting habits. It shows up in everything. But this Indiana team has the exact same resume as Michigan last year when these first rankings came out, and Michigan was ranked number 2. And some people are saying this is obviously brand bias. Others are saying, of course, Michigan was ranked higher. They were returning a bunch of old veteran guys who had just won back-to-back Big Ten championships and been to the playoffs 2 times in a row. Well, it's only logical in that scenario that we would think they're the better program, right? I think that's the problem. We're not going off what we're seeing on the field right now in that scenario. We're going off our preconceived notion, what they did last year and the year prior. We're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to check that preconceived stuff at the door. Their job is to get the best teams based on what they've done this year. So if they're already acknowledging, or in that argument, you're already acknowledging what they've done the prior 2 years, you have failed already at your job. This Indiana team, keep in mind, didn't have a last year. And we're going to continue to run into this situation as we move forward, where we see teams kind of come out of nowhere, and they'll have done it by flipping a coaching staff, flipping a roster. Indiana did both. And now this Indiana team, which you can say, well, Michigan would have a ton more talent than them. Well, do they? This Indiana team has a ton of NFL players. In that scenario, yes, Michigan had a ton more talent. But this Indiana team, not like your normal team, this fairy tale team in this scenario, they've got a lot of NFL players. They've got dudes who didn't come out of high school with that pedigree, but who have developed over college to become those kind of players. They're legit as hell, man. They're legit. We all know it. Like, and especially people watching this show as Big Ten fans, we've all seen them. They're a formidable opponent to Ohio State, who is the committee's number 2. And when we talk about them versus Penn State, we went over their resume. Their best win at home to Illinois, who is now 3-3 in the Big Ten. That's their best. West Virginia, maybe their second best, and they are, I think, 4-4 right now as well. So 2 500 teams are their best wins, and their loss, obviously a quality loss, but it was still at home to a team that, they were 3.5-point dogs to. Indiana's best win, atrocious. Washington, I think Washington is 4-4 in the Big Ten. So their best win has sucked. Every team they've played, each one, not a single one of them, has a winning conference record. But how have they played in all those games? They've been absolutely dominant. 14 points or more in every single one of those games. So when we look at those 2 teams, I don't know how you can honestly judge Penn State and rank them and seed them higher. It just doesn't seem right to me. It doesn't seem fair to me. And does it matter in ranking number 1? No, but it kind of tells us the logic that they're using. And I just disagree. Absolutely. Let's talk about Texas. Does Texas belong ahead of them? Texas's best win is at Vanderbilt. Texas was propped up early in the season by a win against Michigan. They were embarrassed by Georgia in that was just about as soundly as you could get whooped when you got a quarterback in Carson Beck throwing you 3 interceptions and you still just get pounded out like that. And Texas should have taken quite a big hit in all those power ratings and all those metrics that we're not privy to. We can only go by the ones that are made public. They've got a ton of data getting spit out at them. And if they're just relying on this data, I got a problem with that as well. But Texas obviously perceived to have so much more talent than Indiana. And these people are thinking in the back of their mind, there's no way that if Indiana lined up against Texas, I could possibly pick Indiana to beat them because of the talent. But like that gentleman said to me, this is a new era. In the portal era, there are a bunch of transfers coming in, coming out. The whole perceived talent on teams is going to be, hopefully, we're all going to recognize after a couple more drafts what this transfer portal can do for a squad like that Indiana team. I think they're loaded with NFL talent. I really do. And I think we're going to see that. And it might take a couple more years for it to sink in that teams like that pop up are popping up because they've done such a good job in the portal identifying value guys who are smart, who want to come in and in this case, kind of move up, right? These guys, a lot of them moved up from lower tier programs into the Big Ten, and they were ready to go. They're well coached. They're studs. We look at a team like BYU popping up. BYU always an older team. Like, these are talented guys too. Maybe it's just going to take a couple years of teams like Indiana and BYU performing well in that playoff to see if they should alternate. Maybe it'll just take a couple of years of teams like Indiana or BYU making it in and performing well in the playoff before they kind of change their tune. But then again, you've got the what if the way they're perceived makes them the away team in those playoffs instead of the home team. And then we don't get to fully see if they actually could have done what those home teams could have done. You know what I mean? Just a bummer. I hope this is not the way it continues. I think there's been a lot of public backlash on this, particularly when you look at Indiana versus Penn State. And these people are human. They hear what everybody's saying, so they can try to isolate themselves as much as they want. But we've seen some things seep into that committee before that has kind of changed their minds in the way they vote based on how the public is reacting to the job that they're doing. And again, this entire making these things public for all these weeks leading up, I don't think it's beneficial at all. To be honest, I think that what you've got now is a bunch of people talking crap about this committee already. And what you want is for them to have the utmost integrity. We want everybody believing in them. So when you get to the end, you don't got the hate that you got from Florida State last year when they jostled their rankings around, making them think that they were all good heading into the final couple weeks, and then just, oh, nope, you're not, right at the end. The other disagreement I had with them, and not a very big one, was I think that Georgia belongs in that number 2 spot. They chose Ohio State, but I think that Georgia's resume, with both the best win of the season, to be honest, at Texas at night, Texas was number 1. Georgia took it to them. Ohio State's win against Penn State, also a very good win, a top 5 win on the road. Not quite as good as that Texas or that win at Texas to me. And then when you look at their second best win, this is where Georgia separated a little bit on that side of it with the 34-3 win against Clemson, who now just took their second loss, but still a very talented team. Ohio State's second best win to Iowa, who's maybe the 35th or so power rated team in the country. But Ohio State definitely with a better loss, one of the best losses you can have by 1 point on the road to the number 1 team. So Ohio State, a better loss than Texas's loss at Alabama. And the argument here is Ohio State has played better. I talked about it on yesterday's show. Georgia's definitely played some stinkers with the 1-point win at Kentucky. They also only beat Mississippi State by 10. The Florida game, when you just kind of watch the game, it didn't really match up with the score, which was a 14-point win. The line was 16.5. So Georgia kind of did what you thought they would at the end. But that was a pretty doggone close game against the majority of the time, the third string Florida quarterback. And then some people also trying to throw in the first half against Alabama, where Alabama just got out to a 28-0 win and totally mollywopped them in the first half. Georgia comes all the way back, takes the lead in the second half. I got an issue with that. Like, you cannot ding them twice. You're already dinging them for a loss against Alabama. You now can't say, oh, and also they played like crap in the first half of that loss. Like, it's already a loss. That's one negative point. You can't add a second one for the same game. That's my opinion. Anyway, not very concerned about that 2-3 range because these teams are so close. I actually think Ohio State's the better team. I think if they played 100 times, Ohio State would win 51. Really, really close between the two of them. Just a matter of who brings it in the big game. But that's my thoughts on ranking number 1. Shout out to Columbus Apparel Co., the proud sponsor of Juckonbucks, your 4th to 7th favorite college football show. I'd appreciate it if you could check those guys out at columbusapparelco.com. The next time you have any screen printing or embroidery needs, anything like that, custom apparel, they've also got a full line of Ohio and Columbus themed apparel, as well as a full line of Juckonbucks merchandise that they designed and sell at their website for me at columbusapparelco.com. So do check them out. They're Buckeyes, they're Juck guys, they're local, and they're folks just like us. And when you go there, if you use the promo code JUCK20, you'll get 20% off. Check them out, columbusapparelco.com. All right, let's get to IGB. IGB, after wearing oven mitts during practice for the entire week leading up to the Penn State game, he goes out and makes one of the best interceptions you'll ever see. Totally physical player, like the kind of guy who was, if he was playing for the opposite team, would drive you nuts because he is so physical. He is so handsy. He maybe gets away with some penalties here or there. Sometimes he drives us nuts by getting called for too many of those penalties. Jim Knowles was asked about him at the press conferences on Tuesday, and Jim Knowles said, you can't take 3 penalties, but a guy like him who's physical, who gets up and gets it, definitely someone you would love to have on your team. Any day of the week, you take a guy like that. And he was awarded this week. After the oven mitt week, he got himself a huge award, the Bronco Nagurski National Defensive Player of the Week for IGB. Congratulations to our dude who, let's be honest, there's some folks who are getting a little irritated with him recently, including our buddy Dylan, but very proud to see him get that award. Huge confidence builder as we head into the stretch run of the season. If you've listened to me for any amount of time, you know that I like to talk about football coaches, college football coaches. I'm fascinated by the job. I think it's really unique in American sports, the way these guys kind of become the face of the program. Like when you think about your favorite NFL team, I don't know what pops into your head, but when I think of the Cleveland Browns, sadly, Kevin Stefanski is not the first thing that comes into my head. But when I think of Florida State, I think of Mike Norvell. When I think of Georgia, I think of Kirby. When I think of Texas, I think of Sark. You know what I mean? Like, college football coaches become the face. They become either lionized by their own fan bases or absolute pariahs. It just doesn't feel that way in other sports to me. And there's parts of the college coaching job that are way more in depth and in detail. Just so many other facets to their job than there is in other sports when it comes to like raising money and politicking for NIL. Like, this is part of their job now, setting up infrastructure to evaluate potential transfers, just these new things that keep popping up into the gig, back channeling with transfers, coordinating with your NIL partners for your own roster management, for recruiting out of the portal, for recruiting out of high school, recruiting your own roster, keeping those guys home. So much stuff. Keeping good coaches happy. You got that at every level, but it just seems to be so different at the college level where these guys, you look at Saban, a respected coach in an organization, and now everybody wants to come take your guys. And every 2 years, he's getting new coordinators and new assistants everywhere, keeping up a network for your inevitable replacements. I mean, it's so much stuff that other sports head coaches don't have to deal with. It's just a fascinating gig. And when you look at a guy like a Curt Cignetti this year at Indiana, or a Mike Elko at Texas A&M, you go back to James Madison and Duke last year, and those are the type of guys that you're looking for when you're looking for a new head coach. You want the next big guy, the next up and comer. And every week, 247 puts out their list of coaches of the week. And for week 10, they put that list out. And I'm bringing it up because they got a couple of Buckeyes on that list. The Big Ten head coach of the week, Ryan Day, for that big win at Penn State, and the boulder that was released off of his shoulders that really showed up Tuesday's press conferences. The Big Ten coordinator of the week, Jim Knowles, who did not allow Andy Kotelnicki into the end zone. And the last time that happened for Kotelnicki was also against Jim Knowles when they were at Kansas and Oklahoma State. In the SEC, Shane Beamer, the Gamecocks head coach, who obliterated Mike Elko's Texas A&M squad at night in South Carolina. And that was awesome. And a great scene at the Willie B that everybody finally got to see. Like, I feel like this little secret that all of us college football junkies have had for years about South Carolina and the environment has kind of spread to the general public this time based on their performance on Saturday in the pregame and the sandstorm. It was just electric. In the ACC, Jeff Brom and Rhett Lashley. Rhett Lashley is a guy who is at SMU that's really becoming, okay, this dude's legit. This dude's a real up-and-comer, 40 years old. And it's just these type of coaches you always want to keep your eye out for. So moving forward, you know who the next Curt Cignetti is before it happens, and you're not so surprised when that guy comes to Indiana and absolutely turns it around. Joey McGuire at Texas Tech gets the Big 12 honor. Willie Fritz at Houston gets the honor down there for knocking off Kansas State in the Big 12. In the MAC, Toledo's Jason Candle. This is another coach from the Mount Union pipeline. Goes to Toledo just like Matt Campbell did. Matt Campbell at Iowa State. He's going to be pursued by some heavy hitters again. And remember, this is the second time around. The first time around was when Urban Meyer retired, and it was passed on to Ryan Day. At that point in time, Matt Campbell was a head coaching candidate for a lot of big-time jobs. He didn't take it. He stayed there, and it looked like 2 years ago that was a huge mistake as his career, his results at Iowa State had kind of trended down. Now they're back up, as is his stock, and people are going to come calling, and that's pretty interesting. But when you look at these guys, Conference USA, Rich Rodriguez, Jacksonville State, and they beat Liberty. Now, Rich Rodriguez already had his chance to get the call up to the big leagues. I guess he did even before he went to Michigan at West Virginia, another pretty big-time job. But those guys, the Jason Candles, the Rhett Lashleys, those are the type of guys that we're going to see be the next Mike Elko's, be the next Curt Cignetti's. And Jeff Traylor, don't want to not include him. UTSA out of the American Athletic Conference, he wins that award for them. That's another guy that's been incredibly successful at UTSA. He's going to get a pretty big job pretty soon, as is GJ Kinney, his protege at Texas State. This guy at Texas State, when we want to talk about roster management in terms of a young, energetic guy who knows how to get players, he got a bunch of dudes to come to Texas State, which is a school, I bet 50% of the audience of even college football junkies has never heard of, Texas State. They've got players at Texas State, thanks to GJ Kinney, who's now showing his coaching chops, and he did so last year in his very first year. So a lot of up-and-coming coaches, and that stupid who you going to get conversation should never be, okay, let's look at the top 5 coaches in the country and say, well, can we get him? I don't think he'd come. Can we get him? Nah, he wouldn't come. I wouldn't want Brian Kelly. You know what I mean? That conversation's garbage. By the way, I talked to Chris last week about Timmy Chang. Timmy Chang is a former quarterback from Hawaii, and Dylan Gabriel passed Timmy Chang for second in all-time yardage in NCAA history. So I was telling Chris about Timmy Chang and watching every weekend for a couple of years there. You could watch, ESPN would always show, it seemed like, the Hawaii game. So after the West Coast game, right? After late night Pac-12 after dark, Pac-10 back then, you could watch Timmy Chang in Hawaii. They would play it every week. It would start at like 2 a.m. And if you were getting your clock cleaned in gambling, you could try to win it all back with Timmy Chang in Hawaii, and he would usually oblige. So I was always a big fan of Timmy. And I'm reading this list here about coaches of the week last week. And sure as crap, Timmy Chang pops up on that list. He's the head coach at Hawaii. I didn't even know. Congratulations, Timmy Chang, my man. Love that guy. So yesterday at the Woody, Ryan Day, Jim Knowles, Will Howard speak to the media. And the first observation I had is Ryan Day sounds like himself again. I thought for a while there that he was maybe just trying to have this really hard edge to him, super serious edge, to give off the vibe to everybody like, look, this is how we're handling here, strictly business. And it looked like the outsiders were saying how tight he looked, even at Big Ten media days. People that were close to the program were saying, I think it's been just the opposite. He's been really loose. I can just say from what I saw, he looked like he was incredibly tight to me sometimes. Maybe it looked so tight that it looked to me like, okay, he wants to portray this. Well, when I saw him yesterday, it sounded like the old Ryan Day. Just he's taking his time to explain his answers. He's very comfortable. It just seems like that win at Penn State really recalibrated him, took some weight off of him. I think it's a good thing for the whole program. And it was very enlightening. Some really interesting information. For starters, Zen Mihalski, who came in at left tackle in the Nebraska game, is still injured. But even if he wasn't, they're sticking with the lineup of Donovan Jackson at left tackle, Carson Hinsman at left guard, Seth McLaughlin at center, Tegra Shabola at right guard, Josh Fryer at right tackle. And it's very clear that that was the right move. And I think they knew it all along. They just wanted to give Zen a shot against Nebraska, a game that they thought they would win easily, that they maybe didn't take as seriously as they should have. And they wanted to give him a shot to earn that spot, to just hopefully not have to shift around a bunch of positions. It would have been the easiest way to go. They didn't want to disrupt the other spots if they didn't have to. Injury forced them to have to pull Zen and go the Donovan Jackson route. And thankfully, we got to see what we got to see on Saturday against Penn State with that offensive line as that makeshift, and you call it makeshift. Somebody said this the other day. It's not makeshift. He said, well, how's it makeshift when it's just back? You're putting in backups. That just shifting guys around positions. That's basically what that term has always meant to me. So the makeshift offensive line that they put together, absolutely ridiculous performance. And that offensive line won the offensive player of the game, all except for Tegra Shabola, who did not grade out a champion. So he couldn't win unless he graded out a champion. And Brian Day was asked about that and said they don't really like to make those grades public. He was close and they made sure to praise him. But, the grades are the grades. And I like that. So one thing he did want to say when he was asked about the guards is just give a little more insight into what Seth McLaughlin is doing out there with this offensive line. And I think it is so amazing. This guy is, I think he's probably, look, I'm not hip to all the other centers in college football, but based on his performance, based on his grades, based on what he's meant to the number 2 rated team in the country, this guy has got to be like in the top 3 for the Remington Trophy right now for the best center in the country, which if we remember back after that Michigan game, after the Auburn game, remember Alabama needed that last second pass to beat Auburn last year. That was because of a snapping issue between McLaughlin and Jalen Milroe, that they got backed up 15 yards and needed that longer pass. And then you had the Michigan game where he was, embarrassing snaps there as well. And he left Alabama almost immediately after the season. And when Ohio State signed him, they were the butt of jokes. And I'm not just talking about Michigan fans. I'm talking about national writers. We're talking about, look how down Ohio State's offensive line is that they have to resort to that guy. Ha, 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 ha. And now what he's done, I think, is a testament to himself. Like what a strong guy he is. We've all heard him talk, just mental fortitude, knowing, confidence in yourself. And he talked about his struggles with that. It's such a cool story. One of the coolest ones we have all year in all of college football, I think. based on everybody in college football was just making fun of this guy and the season that he's having. Ryan Day had some things to say about him yesterday. Let's listen.
Having Seth in there certainly has built the calmness isn't the word, but a confidence, they're much more sure of themselves in there. And Seth gets everybody on the same page, but also, talks to them about how we're going to do things, in terms of footwork, about hand placement, about the double teams. And I think that's been great for Carson to see that. When you think about Carson's, first couple years here, I don't think, we ever expected Luke to leave after 3 years, and he did, and kind of left a hole there. So Carson got forced into action a year early. Another year under Luke and seeing Luke operate for another year as a senior would have gone a long way. And that's usually the ideal situation for a center. Carson got forced into action, sooner than we have liked. But now he's got a chance to see Seth work. And I think that's really going to help him in his future. And you saw it there on Saturday. And like you said, whether it's guard or center, I think he's in a better place now. And certainly going out there and doing it on the field, leads us to believe that's the case.
So he gets into Carson there, and he did earlier say, discussing Carson, why did they choose him? And he said it was really nothing that stood out in practice that made them think, oh, Carson's going to go into Penn State and light him up. They had talked about what we're going to do with Carson in the preseason, and, they had him at the backup center. And they thought that Tegra just gave them more at right guard. Carson had also gotten sick with the hand, foot, and mouth, and he lost a ton of weight. They didn't say that, but I saw a picture of him when he was visiting the hospital after he had recovered for that. 3 weeks after, you would have thought that things would have been back to normal, and he looked like a tight end. I mean, he still needed to put a lot of muscle weight back on, a lot of chub back on, and he certainly did. He looked like a massive guard against Penn State. So when you look at his situation, you look at the situation of the Buckeyes from the center that they had last year, which I'm not crapping on Carson. He did the best he could in that situation, but a young guy in that position. And then you go to a dude like Seth. I mean, this line just so much better. And boy, what a difference between Carson Hinsman, that game versus the last couple of games we saw him play last year. He was just excellent, rose to the moment. Really awesome to see that. Now, superstar defensive tackle Tyleik Williams did get injured at the end of the Penn State game. He is listed as day-to-day. And Dylan asked both Ryan Day and Jim Knowles about Caden McDonald.
That route quickly, which took that away, which I think is a big deal.
Last one to build.
Is Caden McDonald one of the best game wreckers you have along the offensive line? Do you believe that to be true?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's a guy that, particularly when you put him in those situations where he's just like head up the center, and his job is to just knock that guy back. I think he's showing to have the ability to really change the game and change the line of scrimmage. So definitely a guy who's earning himself more playing time.
Is he physically capable of playing more, or is he kind of in a spot where you just need him to play like a smaller amount of snaps so he's going to be as explosive as possible?
Yeah, I think he's capable. You just don't want to throw 50 plays on him, but you just try to ratchet it up over the course of time.
So Dylan, a pro's pro, who will be with me tomorrow, and we'll get a little more in depth in that. And I've talked to him about like his philosophies as a journalist and such. Obviously, we've all talked, everybody watching this, who's a Buckeye fan, about Caden McDonald. Like, this guy is an impact player, and we would like to see him play more. It takes a guy like Tyleik and Ty Hamilton, who are also impact players, and just lets them be closer to 100% throughout the game when you can add another guy who there's little to no drop off. I mean, he is so good that, I think he's on that same trajectory as Tyleik is. I really do. Obviously, he's got a lot more development, but he's just an impact player. And Dylan likes to ask questions, even if he knows the answer, he knows what they're going to say, just to get him on record as saying, and they both said yesterday, yes, we need to get that individual more snaps. It's not a broad question about depth for the position. It's that specific man right there. And now he's got them both on record as saying that. And that's what Dylan likes to do because he's a savvy pro. And that's why I have him on here. Not just that, but, a lot of other reasons as well. and he's certainly not a negative Nancy, as a lot of you guys call him, and definitely not on drugs, as he was accused of from the other guy. And I know that for sure, I think. Anyway, Caden McDonald, a huge help to that defense. Ryan Day referenced that play, that third down where he just blew the center back, which was awesome. Ryan Day also wanted to discuss Donovan Jackson and how he embraced moving to left tackle yesterday.
Time you're making a move like that in a big game and going against a high-end player like Carter is, there's a lot to process there, but he never flinched at all. He never thought twice about it. He embraced it. I think, Justin did a great job of preparing him, in 1 week. Now he had been getting reps out there in practice, but it's not the same as preparing to play in a game, especially when you're on the silent count, especially against a great player like Carter. And so, we really did tailor the game the best we could around that. There was a couple third downs. We just had to call it and play it. And we did help him with the cadence that one time. And then Carter got us, on the other ones. But I thought Donnie absolutely just fought his tail off and played physical the whole time and wore those guys down and embraced a new role in a tough spot. So I think he can be a very good tackle. I mean, just watching his athleticism, his length, the way his feet move. He can play good tackle for us. Now we got to keep getting him the reps and keep getting more and more of the experience of being out there in confidence. But
certainly the performance made you feel really good moving forward with him there. Hearing that makes you feel even better. Ultimate team guy, really, really smart kid. If you ever heard him talk, I think I've played him here before. Really like that guy, and he's done nothing but help himself and his draft stock and everything else. Ryan Day was also given the opportunity to Justin Fry did a really good job with this line for sure. And you heard him bring that up. He was asked to, talk about basically how Justin Fry has turned the corner by Andy Backstrom from Letterman Row. And Andy said, I know it's just one game. And they really could have pumped him up at that point. I don't feel like he really took the opportunity to do so. And a lot of people coming and saying now all of a sudden, all you people who talked bad about Justin Fry, look at him now. Like, okay, let's pump the brakes a little bit. He's done a better, everybody's acknowledged the offensive line was playing good before the injury, and now they're playing better here. Ryan Day is the one who gave him the not so hot review out of all the coaching staff. He had the worst review that of the offseason. So, he's got a ways to go. That's for sure, but definitely doing better. And I think everybody has given him the appropriate amount of respect and props for the job that he did against Penn State. And it was also really cool to see him after the game as pumped up as he was with the rest of the staff. But as Ryan Day says, the number one job for his assistant coaches, number one on his priority list, is recruiting in that area. Justin Fry has not quite cut it, and he has got to pull at least one more offensive lineman in this class of 2025, or he's going to put the team in a very precarious position, having to go into the transfer portal and being under the gun to land two quality guys. And that is a bad spot to be. You do not want to rely on that transfer portal for starting offensive linemen. It is the most rare thing in the portal, and you're going to overspend and you're going to overpay. We'll talk about some recruiting here at the end of the show. But anyway, Edric Houston, Ryan Day spoke about him at this press conference, and it is clear from Ryan Day's words that we're not getting overly excited about Edric Houston. Listen to the way he describes him as he discusses Edric moving to the inside now. And again, I was on the Best Damn Podcast in the Land with my buddy Chad last week. Chad called this last week, and he was spot on. Have a listen.
With that defensive tackle situation, what has Edric Houston done to get involved there?
Yeah. Well, he's got a very bright future ahead of him. I think he's going to be a really good football player. Hasn't played a lot inside, so he's learning that position. But I think that when you look at how he projects out, we got one here now. He's got to keep growing. He's got to keep learning from Ty and Tyleek, and the intricacies of playing inside, because it is different than playing on the edge. But he has the size, the power, the strength, the toughness to play inside for us.
Do you think he's going to stay there? And what was his response to the position?
He really embraced it. I think he sees what this could be for him. Not saying that, maybe down the road we wouldn't move him back outside, but I think he realizes, when you go from being, a very athletic and strong defensive end and now moving inside, now you become elite as a 3 technique because.
So, we got one here. When he says that, what they're seeing behind the scenes is something really special. Doesn't surprise any of us. We know the recruiting stuff about him. I mean, like everything about him was top notch, 5-star kid. But I think this is probably much more of a natural spot for him, and that's great. However, he was your big dog on the edge last year in the recruiting class. And as we look at what they got left after Jack and JT leave and what's coming up in the pipeline, and even with 2 edge rushers in the class of 2025 and Zion Grady from from Alabama, and Zahir Mathis from Pennsylvania, 2 highly rated guys, but not the pedigree that Edric Houston had. It's looking a little light, and it's looking like they're going to probably need to address that in the portal as well. The issue there is we know the way that they play their defensive ends. That's not really going to draw a premier edge rusher out of the portal. It's just not a very exciting system for them to want to come and play in. They're going to be looking at things like sack totals from Jack and JT and always contain rushing those 2. And that's not going to be too enticing, but good thing for the interior of the defensive line. He's an absolute stud. He's enormous. And he's now he can go ahead and go pack on the weight because he's got the ability to just be a massive dude and keep that athleticism. Super great athlete. About that defense and about that contain rushing in the defensive line, Ryan Day was asked about the changes that they made from the Oregon game. And we know they had that big powwow on the Wednesday after that game with the coaching staff. We saw some differences at Nebraska and then again at Penn State. He discussed that and called it re-engineering.
I mean, it's looked the way that we've wanted it to look. We almost, kind of a goofy word, but like re-engineer the defense. We had to almost start from scratch after the Oregon game. What I mean by that is not like, scrap everything, but like, okay, what are the base foundations of what we're trying to get done?
Who are our best players? Blah, blah, blah. So he just basically went on and elaborated for a while about that. I encourage you to go check that out if you want to see the full answer. It's pretty long, but safe to say that things are going a little better. I like the fact that he got involved, and a lot of people believe that this defense now looks a little bit more like Jim Knowles' defense when he was at Oklahoma State. Jim Knowles was asked about that, kind of nodded along with the answer, or with the question that, like, yeah, so yeah, it does. So he's doing a little more of what he wants to do, and not just up front, but in coverages in the back end. And that's a good thing for everybody all the way around. Jim Knowles also, and this is our final clip, asked about, so Jim Knowles, this is the first time since Nick Saban made the comment, coming to the podium, and the comment of the antiquated defense, the antiquated 4-man down, and the lack of simulated pressure and the lack of things that Ohio State's defense was doing. And my man, Tony Gerdeman from Buckeye Huddle, could not let him get out of there without asking him this extremely uncomfortable question. Here we go.
It's been a few weeks, but I was wondering about your reaction to Nick Saban's comments about the antiquated pass rush.
I didn't hear them when I don't get to read much or see much. What did he say?
He just, after the Oregon game, just reviewing it, said he thought that the 4-man rush was kind of an antiquated attack.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, he knows what he's talking about. So, I mean, you can't argue with his success, but, we just have to keep evaluating ourselves and getting better.
God, that's uncomfortable. Here's the best part. Tony thought it was already awkward to ask, right? And he asked the question, and then Knowles hadn't heard it. Tony had to explain it. Oh, I love it. Look, if you don't watch that guy, you're missing out. The best dry sense of humor maybe I've ever heard. Absolutely love it, dude. But those are the notes from yesterday that I got coming out of there. And I don't know if you could see it, but that energy from Ryan Day just made me feel, one more. The energy made me feel really good. And we'll talk about some more of those answers a little more in depth tomorrow with Dylan. But a lot of people were questioning, because if you didn't see the all 22, the pass to JJ, that it looked like maybe there was a little hiccup in there in his route, and Ryan Day answered what happened there on that route.
Out of bounds. And then on the second one, I think Jeremiah felt like, the safeties were so deep that the ball wasn't coming his way. And, we tell Will, I mean, if he's anywhere near the depth of the safety, just launch it as far as you can. That's what happened. So, he just has to stay with it. And, but you're right. I mean, those are two missed opportunities that could have been much different.
JJ slowed down a little bit. Didn't think the ball was coming. That was the very diplomatic way of saying, yeah, JJ missed it there, man. JJ missed it. Freshman mistake. Let's hope he doesn't make it again. I mean, I can see how annoying that would be when you very rarely get long balls to contest. I mean, like, those guys are sprinting and running a lot. Having never played wide receiver, I don't often take that into account, but every single play to just all out sprint and put on your best moves. And if you're not getting the ball, or if you're almost certain of it, there's got to be part of you that just like wants to save a little energy for the next play, or 2 more quarters to play. I get it. I did want to run through a couple of stats about the Buckeyes offense, defense, and special teams now through week 10. The scoring offense, 37.8 points per game, ranks 15th nationally. Total offense at 457 yards, 14th nationally. Passing 271 yards, that's 28th. Rushing 186 yards, that's 34th. I thought that was going to be closer to 250 a game. That's a bit of a bummer. We'd like to see that amp up with this new reinvented offensive line, I hope. Third down conversion percentage, 44.6, and that ranks 33rd. Red zone, 96.4. That's 5th in the country, and this is something we talked about. Will Howard coming into the season, he was unbelievable at Kansas State in this and continues to be. Sacks allowed, 10 sacks allowed. That is 21st in the country. Pretty damn good for this offensive line. On the defense, total yards, 256. That is 2nd in the country. Passing yardage, 161, 8th in the country. Rushing, 95 yards, 7th in the country. Opponent third down conversion percentage, 31%. That's 16th in the country. Opponent red zone, 65%. That is 4th in the country. Sacks, 22nd. That's 23rd in the country. So they're in the top 25 of the country in sacks. We never want Ohio State to be in the top 25 of anything. We want them in the top 10. But, not horrible for sure. Now, let's get to special teams, which has obviously been a bugaboo for this team for a long time. Punt, 42-yard average. That's 78th, 14th in the Big Ten. Kick return, 12.2. That is 132nd nationally. There are 134 teams. Punt return, 8 yards. That is 67th nationally. So the special team stuff still not adding up. I really thought this was the year we would see that turn around, see them embrace that a little bit more as, an area where you can catch an advantage in these matchup games. And you've got to practice that. You got to put, you got to want it. You got to want to do it. And I thought that they were a little bummed to see those stats. Hey, it's Juck, and MyBookie is back with another offer for the Juckonbucks audience. Open up a new MyBookie account, and they're going to match whatever you put in 100%. Put in $100, they're going to make it $200. Put in $3, they're going to make it $6, all the way up to $1,000. If you're new to sports gambling, we do picks every Friday. We are +7 on the year for the Juckonbucks official picks, and we're going to keep it on rolling. So sign up for MyBookie. They're going to match your deposit. Use the promo code JUCK, and we're going to go through that every week, every Friday. Also, if you like online casinos, they're going to give you a $10 free chip for that as well. It's a great sports book. I've been using it for years. If you're new to gambling, I'm here every morning at 9:30. Put a question in the chat. I'll help you. I'm an experienced gambler, so to speak. The key is don't risk what you can't afford to lose, and you'll always have fun. Have some fun with me. Sign up, MyBookie, promo code JUCK. Get your free money. All right, my friends, that'll do it for today. I appreciate y'all so much for joining me once again. And tomorrow we will be back with our guy, Dylan Davis, and me and you. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you then. Juckonbucks out. Hey, it's Juck.
Juck. Who is Juck?
Juckonbucks.
Juck on Bucks. Juck on Bucks.
Juck. Juck on Bucks.
My guy Juck.
Juck on Bucks.
My buddy Juck.
Juck is the Juck.
It's Juck on Bucks.
Okay.
Juck is junk.
The Juckeyes. The Juckeyes.
Juck on Bucks.
Junk. Juck. Not junk. Juck.